So today, instead of talking about what could possibly happen with our currencies, why don't we look at a currency that's been going through the decision-making process of, do we support growth? Do we go after inflation? And what do we do with our currency? The three things that all of us are going to have to work out. But Argentina has been going through it first. Now, last year, this Javier Milei, he was elected president, and he came in and said, we're just going to, kill inflation, and we're going to do this by cutting all spending from the government. And that included, retirement funds, food support, and because of this, 51% of the Argentine people went into poverty, okay? But this all started with, some good news. Less than 6 months ago, Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, was in Buenos Aires congratulating the president for bringing Argentina back from the precipice, as the libertarian secured more than $40 billion in loans from the IMF and multilateral lenders to bolster his government. Who controls the IMF? The U.S. does. So the U.S. forced them to give. Why do we know they forced them? This is why. Argentina, and depends on who you listen to, has between 30 and 50% of all the lending from the IMF. They might as well just name it the AMF, the Argentina Monetary Fund, okay? And so here they are, 6 months later, after Bessent, who is now moving our strategy. This guy is our strategist for us going in there and not paying interest on our debt, letting the dollar fall, and putting on all these tariffs across the world. This is the guy who is down there congratulating. This is the guy that our trust is in to bring America through our issues. Tell me, what am I missing here? So when they came in, they cut all the spending, guess what? Down came inflation. It went from 289% down to 34%, okay? Fantastic. But they did one thing. They hook the Argentinian peso to the US dollar when they did this. So the peso remained much stronger than it normally would, okay? Now, this caused problems. Look here in the second paragraph. It sucked in imports and prevented Argentina from building the stock of dollars it needed to repay a mountain of foreign debt. So think about this. We saw this with Switzerland. Switzerland, their currency rallied because it's an alternative currency. Down went, they're actually deflating. And everyone in Switzerland could buy anything they wanted throughout Europe at much cheaper prices because their currency was so strong. Same thing applies to Argentina. And so out went, so think about it. You buy an import as someone from Argentina, and you pay for it, and guess what? All your external debt is paid for in dollars. It's not paid for in pesos. So out went all the reserves that could have been building up for Argentina to pay their debt. It was being paid for so people could buy things at a cheaper level, okay? So this then left them open to a shock if something happened. And of course, on September 7th, the Libertarians suffered an unexpected landslide defeat. I think they lost by 20 points, 17, 20 points, in a province that has a third of the Argentines there. And now the general election is coming up on October 26th. So the peso plunged overnight down 10%, hitting the bottom exchange rate band. That's what they do in the central banks. They say, here's the high end, here's the low end. It can trade within these bands, okay? But it went right to the low end, all right? And the reason these bands were not put in, at first it was fixed exactly to the dollar, but once they got to $20 billion loan, they put in the currency band. Now, the fears amounted among local investors. The government would have to abandon the ban and devalue the peso. And so the central bank, over 3 days, had to spend $1.1 billion of their $6 billion in reserves to prop up the peso last week. It was unsustainable. He flew to Washington to talk to Trump. But the dollar sales, this $1.1 billion sales to buy the peso, unnerved bondholders who fretted that the government was burning through scarce hard currency reserves it could eventually need to pay debts, sending the bond prices plummeting. Okay? So now you got your bonds going down. And they'd say here that they had fallen to $6 billion of foreign exchange that they have. And so the Argentine National Bank, citing Milei's completely inconsistent exchange rate policies and his lack of interest in political agreements, is the problem. Now, Bessent gave his offer of support at a meeting, and they're going to discuss this with Trump today. It calmed the market, the peso rebounding 6%, and the yields on the Argentinian dollar debt, which moves inversely to prices, falling 3.7%. So that $278 billion in Argentina dollar debt went down 3.7% because the peso rebounded, all right? Now, Milei went in and said, we get rid of all our taxes on agricultural exports, so the exporters will sell billions of dollars of stockpiled crops and boosting the central bank's access to dollar. They had to stop the hemorrhaging, but it actually hasn't worked so far, all right? And analysts have warned U.S. help on top of billions of multilateral loans Argentina already received would not solve the deeper political and economic challenges. Now, we did a video on this last year on the U.S. Exchange Stabilization Fund, which is controlled by the president, all right? And Bessent says, as Treasury Secretary, I'm going to bail out another country using the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Now, it has $200 billion in assets in it, but they're not liquid. There's only about $22 billion of liquid, so here's the problem, right? It's not enough money, the $22 billion. So what are they going to do here? I have no idea. Now, this economist here said, look, the government's only going to help, U.S. government's only going to help if they have a consistent exchange rate and a monetary policy, which is they're going to bail them out. But why? You saw two things in this article. One, they say the bondholders are afraid that all the Argentinian assets were going to be sold off, and thereby they wouldn't be able to pay back the interest and the principal on the bonds that are due this year, okay? And with the peso devaluing now, this also is affecting the bondholders. And you say, so why does Trump care? Well, the question you should be asking yourself is, who owns the Argentinian government dollar debt, right? So they have about 140 billion inside Argentina in pesos. They have 278 billion in debt in dollars outside. That debt is owned by hedge funds, private credit, and private equity, all U.S. based, all run by multi-billionaires who are major supporters of the Trump administration. So if they fail here, right now, okay, all those bondholders, they're going down, all right? And so what's happening here is the U.S. government is stepping in, and they will step in. They're not going to solve the problem, right? We're going to push it down the road, okay? We're going to make some, what do you want to call it, demands on Argentina. But here's the problem. On October 26th, there's going to be an election, and it looks like he's gone, okay? So if Milei's gone and we got the right-wing guy out, will Trump then walk on Argentina? I don't think so. I think he's never walking on them because all our billionaires, all their money is in that $278 billion. And you say, well, why would those stupid people buy that? Well, listen, you're looking at from last year, go back 2 or 3 years, 4 years, that debt's trading whatever it was, 20 cents on the dollar, 15 cents, 25, 30 cents. And by going in and doing all the thing Milei did, it goes up to 50, 60, 70, 80 cents on the dollar. That's what the hedge funds and the private credit and the private equity want, okay? So that it failed is going to hit their bonds, and Trump is going to make sure that that doesn't happen. What do you think?